So you're probably wondering why dark fantasy, Val? Why dark fantasy with romance? It's a choice. It's a choice. It's because I like the idea that people can die and that terrible things can happen, and I can create scenarios that might make PTSD and gore and epic battles. I like battles and monsters. And you can't have battles and monsters without some sort of darkness looming over the series and atmosphere of the writing and things like that. So, yeah, I like writing dark fantasy with romance for several reasons. So the dark fantasy opens up doors and opportunities that I can get dark, I can get gritty, I can make us cringe and piss and feel some pain, both visceral and emotional and mentally. But at the same point, there's that promise with the subgenre of romance, right? That some part of this has to work out, and at the end of every book, I have to make sure you have a happy for now with that romance, that relationship that I am focused on, or a happily ever after. And it's sort of always, and that's why a lot of my dark fantasy can be labeled as grim bright, right? It is a ugly world. There are terrible things happening, but on a bright note, and very grim, but there is always hope and light at the end of the tunnel, not only for the relationship and romance aspect, but for the dark fantasy aspect, that we have a chance to pull out of dark fantasy and converge into a simple fantasy setting, right? That's what my characters are all fighting for, especially when it comes to, you feel this the most probably in the Trayvon family saga, but even in the Cedric series, with each passing book, you realize they're trying to fix the world on some capacity and take down those who have created this grimness in the world and darkness in their lives and have taken things from them or forced them under curses and things like that. So it's a common theme in a lot of my writing. You get the same feeling in the Queen's Incubus, the Carnal Throne series under Honey Cummings, right? It is a very grim situation that Princess Valeshka is tossed in, and her options are next to none. And that grim things have happened. The world is broken. The gods are lost or missing. And it's all because this other goddess was taken away by a wish by a mortal vibe. But there's this, again, this sense of love prevails. I know it sounds very cheesy, but I like that, right? I like that. And that's, again, that goes back. Why dark fantasy romance? I like it to be grim and dark and then overcome it through their love or the strength of the relationships they build, not just romantically, but also platonic, right? So a lot of found family unfolds in my stories. I like the idea, especially in the Carnal Throne series, her family has forsaken her and sacrificed her and waylaid her and used her. And it's the new people in her life, or the people that she's chosen to take into her life and start breaking apart and building that wall and boundaries and claiming her power, that she creates a family. Cedric series is very much a found family. They have all been wronged by the same force and people. They sort of a neutral party between each other, but they also, there's this sense of camaraderie. Even though at a drop of a hat, you think Cedric, Lilith, Roma Santa will absolutely bail on the other two easily for their own selfish reasons, which, again, that's where the dark fantasy comes in. They are still a found family. They lean on each other way more than they probably have any business doing, but they do, because that's as close as trust comes when you're a mortal and deity in a medieval fantasy, urban fantasy kind of mashup filled with mythology and beast. A lot of alt history in that one. So a lot of the grim and darkness comes from some real things from our reality. Trayvon family saga is a little different. There is a sense of found family, but there's no broken family situation. John grew up in a loving household, a strict household, but a loving household with a hermit. And then Dante, you realize, was very loved, not only by his dad and the king and his cousins and things like that, but even the villain has sort of an affectionate aspect towards him. So he was very loved. But the love that they share between John and Dante is something completely different. And it's sort of fun to feel those splashes side by side in that series in a very grim fantasy setting. And the magic I downplayed very low in that series compared to some of my others. So I will say in my recent work of progress, I'm playing with the dynamic of Isabel's family is probably they're both dynamic, right? There's a sense of caring and selfishness that happens within their actual families, right? That touch her and you'll die, or touch them and you'll die kind of family aspect for both of them, I would imagine, that I've been able to write in. But the same point, but who judges them the most? Their own family, right? So I have that sort of dynamic happening for both of them that they can resonate with. And they have to tiptoe, right? Their family wants to be all in their private business, but they try to keep that boundary up. So it's a lot of boundary pushing within their family, but it's not necessarily toxic. It's more of everyone has their own goals and they're not thinking about my main character's personal goals or needs per se, even though they're trying to voice it to the best of their abilities. So that's been a lot of fun because I've always swung differently in all my other books to date. So look forward to that kind of fun aspect when it comes to I accidentally reanimated the Billionaire's Hellhound. It's such a mouthful, but it nails what that book's about. But why dark fantasy romance? I like to get gritty, but I also like it to be hopeful at all times. So tell me what you think.